Listeners, many a times healing doesn't come from where we expect it. For some, it's faith. For others, it's science. But every so often, it's the courage to ask, what if there's another way? Listeners, today's story begins with loss and transforms into legacy. From a tragedy that took a mother and nearly took more, came a question that changed everything. Good nutrition, something so basic, hold the key to restoring mental health? Welcome back, listeners, to this episode of the Mindful Journey podcast. I'm your host, Sana, and joining me is David Frazier, whose family's journey led to the creation of Truehope Canada, a company born from heartbreak, prayer, and persistence. We'll explore the impact of micronutrients on the brain, challenge what we think we know about mental health treatment, and maybe open up a few new ways to think about healing itself. So, with that, David, welcome to the Mindful Journey. I'm really, really honored to have you here with us.
Well, it's really a pleasure, Sana. Thank you so much for having me on.
Pleasure is mine. Pleasure is mine, David. So, David, I mean, honestly saying to begin with, your family story, it is both heartbreaking, yet it's very, very inspiring. And when we talk about mental health, um, medication often dominates the conversation. It's kind of a stigma, or just normally we accept, okay, I'm taking the pills, or just take the pills, you'll get better, and all that. But your family went another route. How did that initial shift toward micronutrients even begin, if you can, share?
Yeah, thank you for asking the question. The journey really all began with the pharmaceutical industry. And, my mother came from a history of mental illness, and that led to her father taking his own life, committing suicide in the late 1970s.
Hmm.
And my mother was struggling for about 10 years, going from 1983 to 1993. And finally, things came to a head in January of 1994 when we found ourselves in a very stressful situation. The family had just uprooted and moved, and she was just having a real time handling life. And so she decided to go to the doctor to receive help, and she received a diagnosis for bipolar disorder. She received a prescription for Prozac. At that point in time, it was a fairly new medication. The SSRI medications had just come out into the late 1980s. And so she ended up getting on this medication. And within 3 weeks of beginning that prescription for Prozac, she ended up committing suicide. And so that was the beginnings of it. But my mother and father had 9 children together. And is well known within science, these issues pass on through hereditary lines. And so all 9 of us were suffering in one way or another. Some of us, it was more prevalent that it would have been ADHD. Some of us would have been, hyper irritability with rage. Some would have been hypomania. Bipolar disorder was definitely prevalent in a number of my siblings. And there was 2 of my siblings that were on medications, and the medications weren't working. They weren't working for my mother. They didn't work for her. In fact, the leaked science would come out about a decade later surrounding Prozac and showing that it'll increase your risk of suicide by at best 2 times, but given certain circumstances by anywhere from 8 to 12 times. And so the medications didn't work for my mother. And they weren't working for my older brother, who was homicidal and suicidal. My sister was in her early 20s and married and had a 3-year-old son. And when she wasn't in the psych ward, she had to be on 24-hour supervision because she would obsess about killing herself and her 3-year-old son. And
Mm.
so, and she was on a cocktail of Haldol, Rivotril, Ativan, Cogentin, and Risperidol, and it wasn't working. And so my father's looking at the situation and he's saying, well, there's got to be a better answer. And the very first place that he actually went was to a leading expert in relation to psychiatry. So he
Mhm.
meets with the head psychiatrist out of the Foothills Hospital in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and she just lays him straight after a long conversation that she finally got annoyed of because she said, "Mr. Stephan, you have the best of medications available to you. This is as good as it's going to get." And he wasn't willing to accept that as an answer. And so she finally just opened up the channels and was very bold and very truthful with him and said, "Look, these disorders do not go away, and often in time they get worse. You need to face the reality that you may have to plan more funerals." And my father, that's not what he had gone there to hear, but that's exactly what he did hear, and it's what he needed to hear,
Mhm.
ultimately to pave the road forward in pioneering a new way, a much more effective way, a much more holistic and natural way, in relation to correcting serious mental health conditions and restoring people back to living the lives that they once had, or lives that they never even had before. They'd never had that quality of life. And so that was in 1995 when all of this was really taking place. And, a very interesting answer to prayers came. It's really a story of faith.
Mhm.
And my father would begin to meditate and to pray and to fast on a very regular basis in middle of 1995 when he had exhausted all sorts of options and nothing had delivered. And he was seeking for some kind of divine inspiration that would restore his family.
Okay.
And yeah, and that really, kind of one thing led to another. Nothing happened miraculous overnight, but this is the middle of 1995. By November of 1995, we fast forward and he's walking down a hallway one day with a colleague discussing removing carpets, replacing carpets because he's a property manager over 26 large buildings. And so he's overseeing these projects and he's meeting with this individual one day and he's talking about, their line of work, and he's
Mhm.
overcome with this impression. You need to tell your colleague, you need to tell David Hardy about what's going on at home. And so my father did, and he broke down. It was completely unprofessional. It was outside of the realm of the bounds of their professional um, relationship, and
Mhm.
but it would serve to be incredibly pinnacle in ultimately shifting how people were treated in North America and across the world, but in North America, on in large numbers. Over 100,000 people now at this point in time have had their mental illness corrected through this discovery. But what his colleague would say is, he says, Tony, I've never dealt with mental illness, so I can't relate to you there. He says,
Mhm.
however, I spent over 20 years in the animal feed industry formulating feed for hogs across Western Canada and the Western United States. And he says we saw something common within the hog pens called ear and tail biting syndrome, where the hogs would develop this hyper irritability. They would bite chunks of their ears and tails off each other. And if you didn't pen them away from each other, they'd actually kill each other.
Wow.
He says, we learned in the animal feed industry that you could completely eradicate that disorder simply by putting the proper nutrition into their feed.
Mm.
At that moment, it's like a light bulb went off in my dad's head. He knew it was the answer. And it's a real good thing that he had that confirmation, because they went down to a health food store after this conversation. They picked
Mhm.
up a bunch of different vitamin mineral supplements for my older brother, Joseph. They put him onto it, and it didn't work. And so then they tried some more and it didn't work. And my father, knowing it was the answer, he kept on pursuing this. And finally, by January 18th of 1996, so we fast forward
Mhm.
just over 2 months, and there's 4 products that arrive coming from the United States that were more specialty in nature. More care had been put into the production of them. They're vitamin mineral supplements, but one of them was a colloidal mineral supplement, so it's very bioavailable. It's in a liquid form.
Mhm.
Another one was a multivitamin mineral supplement that was balanced and it was chelated. The minerals were chelated, making it bioavailable. Another one was a calcium, magnesium, phosphorus supplement. Once again,
Mhm.
the minerals being in balance, and they were chelated, which allowed for
Mhm.
proper absorption. And another one was grapeseed extract to help deliver those nutrients to the brain. And so those 4 products were employed, and within 5 days, my brother said it was like a fog lifted, and he could now see what was right and wrong. Within 30 days, he would have no longer received a diagnosis for bipolar disorder. He was now
Wow.
operating in what you would consider to be the normal range. Now, don't get me wrong, he wasn't 100% better,
Mm-hmm.
but he had normal good days and he had normal bad days. But as time went on, he became more and more stable, and the healing persisted as he continued to nourish his body with the nutrients that he needed all along that he wasn't getting out of his diet.
Mm.
The very nutrients necessary to produce hormones and neurotransmitters that help regulate our mood and help
Mm-hmm.
regulate every other aspect of our bodies. So that was the beginning. Now, my sister wasn't willing to get onto them at first. She was living with her husband, and she was 5 hours drive away from us.
Mm.
But circumstances would dictate that she had to come and stay with us to be taken care of because her husband was working a night shift at a factory.
Mm-hmm.
And during her stay, she went suicidal and had a panic attack. And my father just said, okay, we're not doing this. The medication clearly isn't working for you. You're going to try this. And he was able to get her onto these supplements. And once again, within 5 days, there was quite the improvements, but she had a lot more improvements necessary. So she was by no means well within 5 days. But the hallucinations that she had had were gone. She was starting to be able to reason, able to have
Mm-hmm.
logical conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a marked difference enough that when her husband came to pick her up, even though he was very unhappy about what was going on, when he came to pick her back up and bring her back home, he was impressed enough that they continued on with it. And within 45 days, they had her off of her 5 medications and she
Wow.
was thriving, doing well. Never would she need to go on a psychiatric medication again. Never would she
Mm.
need to be admitted to the psych ward again. And this is back in 1996.
6. Oh.
He went on to have 3 more children with her faithful husband, and they're still together today. And she went on to write a beautiful book called A Promise of Hope, and that was distributed through HarperCollins Canada, and it was available in Chapters and Costco and online through Amazon and Audible. And so, the story was really getting out there, but
Mm-hmm.
it was never intended to be a business. But yet, when word spread, because we grew up in a small community and everybody saw the difference that had taken place in my brother, people started asking questions.
Mm.
And, questions about, well, do you think whatever you did with Joe, do you think it'd work for my wife with
Mm.
depression? Or do you think it'd
Mm.
work with my son with ADHD? Or there's even a lady just down the road from us that
Mm.
almost nobody knew that she actually lived there because she was struggling with schizophrenia and agoraphobia. So she'd never leave the house.
Mm.
Her husband would, but she wouldn't. And then all of a sudden, she's trying it. And everyone's starting to see her at church. And she's walking around the neighborhood, conversating with their neighbors that didn't know who she was because she never came out of the house unless it was for doctor's appointments. And so we saw this radical transformation. And that's what ultimately ended up getting my father and David Hardy to go
Mm.
and try to get this into the hands of doctors, thinking that, the Canadian medical system would adopt it,
Mm.
and that became a whole other battle in and of itself. But that was the really the beginnings of this phenomenal discovery that would then go on to eventually be scientifically validated and bless over 100,000 lives across the world.
Wow. Wow. That's actually quite a journey in there, David. Quite a journey. Quite a journey. One thing that um I really, really, I mean, I must appreciate because once again, skepticism will be there. There will be skeptics who will say that um
Mhm.
that there is nothing called as a miracle. This everywhere there's a logic, there's a science, and there's exactly here logic and science. But I think because you mentioned that all of these, it all happened. It all started, way back in 1995, and that was a time when even mental health was, kind of not. It was not discussed in the mainstream. So I think from that perspective, if we look at it, I think this is very, very, it's phenomenal. And secondly, um, it's practical because the changes, the improvement, they didn't happen instantly or overnight. It took time, but it at least got better.
Mm.
So I think that is something which I really find very, very positive. Even if, because oftentimes we often look for quick fixes, that this particular pill or medicine will have quickly fixed everything. But I think for sustainability and longevity, I think it doesn't happen overnight. Because if something is changing overnight, then maybe, to me, it wouldn't, I wouldn't find confidence in that.
Right. Yep. Yeah,
Uh,
and everybody's different in relation to the way that they respond and how quickly they respond, and
Exactly.
it's largely dependent on gut health as well, because if
Mm-hmm.
you have an unhealthy gut, you're not gonna absorb nearly as rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
You're not gonna be producing a lot of the neurotransmitters that are actually produced in the gut if you have,
Mm-hmm.
gut dysbiosis. And so, there's different factors like that for sure. So sometimes, it's amazing when we hear it that within a couple days somebody has a major turnaround. That's rare,
Mm-hmm.
but it does happen. But generally, it's about 2 to 3 weeks, and people have these life transforming effects from feeding their body and their brain these nutrients that they should have been getting in their food, and that goes down a whole other um, line of discussion surrounding what's been done to our uh, food supply. What has been done
Mm-hmm.
in agriculture that has caused us to be so incredibly deficient? I mean, 2,400 years ago, Hippocrates said, "Let food be thy medicine, and medicine be thy food." And yet, the food is not acting as our medicine today because it's lacking compared to what it should be. And that's a whole other discussion, like I said, surrounding agriculture. But the
Mm-hmm.
fact of the matter is that we're getting about 1/5 of the nutrition that we need out of our food compared to what we would have expected to get about 100 years ago from the same food.
Yeah, I think that's a very important factor to consider, especially when it comes to nutrients and food. And with this, one question comes to my mind, David, that um, we often hear about the mind body connection, especially in discussions around mental health. But nutrition's role in mental wellness, it still feels to me like under discussed. So,
Mm.
from all your experiences and the research, how directly do micronutrients influence emotional stability or cognitive function?
Huge. They influence
Mhm.
it. It's actually a key ingredient, if you will, in the whole of the functioning of the brain.
Mm.
So when you're not producing certain neurotransmitters, communication is not taking place adequately within the brain, because neurotransmitters, all they are is messenger molecules. So they're being produced in your body to then go around and to incite certain actions. And if you're not producing them, that communication isn't happening. And so when you have a brain that is not having the proper communication taking place within it, it's going to be, for lack of better terms, literally retarded. You're going to have retardation in brain function where you don't have the rapid communication happening like it should be. And so when we're talking about cognition, when
Mhm.
we're talking about people being able to make clear and concise decisions,
Mhm.
when we're talking about people being able to handle stressful situations and be able to make, once again, clear and concise decisions given those circumstances, nutrition is absolutely crucial because it is what is necessary to facilitate the production of these various neurotransmitters and hormones, which are messenger molecules in the body to tell the body and the brain what it should be doing and how it should be doing it.
Mm, that makes sense. It's fascinating actually. It's fascinating. And I think in also the sense that um we kind of tend to look for these overcomplicated, high-tech solutions and stuff, which for normal people like us, it would look like, this super expensive and not conventionally, not affordable at all. But I think sometimes the foundation itself, it is so simple. Like it is there with us. It has been there with us. It's how we nourish ourselves.
Hmm. Absolutely. One of the issues that we encountered
Mhm.
when this was first pioneered, when this was first discovered, even after the first independent university studies started to come out on it, showing that it was over 3 times more effective than antidepressants.
Mhm.
Even after that, there was so many naysayers that were saying this is too simple. Vitamins and minerals don't do that. Vitamins and minerals won't correct mental illness. There was so many people that just refused to believe it. They refused it because it was too simple. How could we possibly have missed this answer all along when it was right there in front of our faces, right? And that's, really the question that's begged. But at the end of the day, it was there all along. It's just the problem is that we didn't know how, as a society, how to produce minerals in their balanced and very bioavailable form so as to produce the therapeutic effects that they will produce. And so that's why, once again, my father and David Hardy tried a handful of products on Joseph, my older brother, and they all failed. And it would be just over 2 months of trial and error before they would come across those 4 products that in combination did work. And then eventually, when the first study was being done on those 4 products, there would be a discovery made that one of the products, the levels of minerals varied depending upon the batch. So from one batch to the next, it wasn't a consistent product, thus
Mhm.
producing inconsistent results. So the study was shut down and we were left looking for a replacement because it no longer was delivering the results that we were looking for. And that would eventually lead to us producing our own all-in-one supplement. And that's when the company was really born, was out of necessity to make sure that people had access to these vitamins and minerals in a form that would help correct these severe mental health conditions that they had once been plagued with.
Hmm. And David, before we wrap up, okay, let me just be here a devil's advocate.
Mhm.
Um, have there been cases where your approach didn't work or where traditional medicines it was still necessary?
That's a very great question.
Mm.
And everybody is so individual in relation to their various conditions. When we encounter somebody, let's say that
Mhm.
that somebody comes to us and they're not on medications. Generally, it's as easy as, popping the top of the bottle, taking the supplements, and they're going to see the effects. And that's like more than 9 times out of 10, they're going to see profound effects, especially if they have a mental health condition. But if they don't see the effects, then we begin to ask the question, why? What's going on? And that slowly led us to have a bigger line of products rather than just the one all-in-one multivitamin mineral supplement, so as to correct things like surrounding gut health, to improve the intestinal health, so as to facilitate absorption. So if somebody has significant Candida overgrowth, fungal overgrowth in the intestines, or a major parasitic infection, that needs to be addressed. Otherwise, they'll never see the full effect of it. So in those instances, no, it won't work until you correct those. And we've discovered that over time. But once we get over that hurdle, then yes, that nutrition works. And the reason being is because it's just the proper nutrition that should have been in our food in adequate levels. And we still get it in our food, just not in the therapeutic levels that it should be being delivered. Now, going back
Mm.
to if somebody comes to us on medications, where medications may still be needed.
Mm.
Um, in most instances, and when I say most, I'd say that, that's like 8.5, 85% basically of the people that come to us on these medications
Mhm.
will see a cessation of their symptoms, and they're able to come off of the psychiatric medications completely and feel far better than they ever did when they were on those medications. Albeit, once again, there are the odd individuals that may have
Mm.
been on medications for so incredibly long, or the type of medication that they're on, that it makes it much harder to reduce off of that medication. And
Mm.
sometimes, and we've had this in rare instances where we've had people withdrawing off these medications for over a year, because generally we're doing it within months, right?
Mm.
But we've had certain situations where the dependency has been so incredible, the withdrawal effects have been so incredible. And so in those types of instances, we've had some major hurdles to be able to overcome that and get them well and get them stable. Now, the medications do have a propensity to store in the body. The body puts them into storage so as to protect itself, so into fatty tissues and all of that. Well,
Mhm.
we've seen this where people have had struggles for, over a decade even after coming off of medications if they were on them for an extensive period of time. So if somebody has come to us and they've been on the medications for decades,
Mhm.
sometimes they may anticipate to see struggles even going on for a decade or more afterwards because they will still push those medications into their bloodstream if they go and they're very physically active, if they're undergoing, large amounts of stress. They'll hit what are called drug pockets or drug storage in their body, push it out into the bloodstream, and now they're dealing with the backlash of having medication introduced into their system when their brain chemistry has been normalized through proper nutrition. And now they go into an over-medicated state, which
Mhm.
will bring about different mental health symptoms. So we have
Mhm.
had that. So in those instances, yeah, I appreciate you, playing the devil's advocate there in, you know, punching some holes in it, and please do by all means. But yeah, we've had some real interesting circumstances in working with well over 100,000 people over the years. But for the vast majority of people, they get well
Mhm.
and they get very well, and it's a beautiful thing to see because, as spoken before,
Mhm.
they obtain that quality of life that they once had, or they even obtain a quality of life that they never even experienced before they had gone into that severe mental illness.
That's convincing enough, David. That is. I really, really appreciate the honesty. No, because you very rightly said, because healing, it, um, the path looks the same. I mean, it doesn't look the same. It's unique for everyone. So I think transparency is very, very much needed, and especially when it comes to the wellness industry. Um, Unfortunately, there are this full of miracle supplements or quick fixes, kind of which looks everything like very convenient. How does True Hope separate itself from that noise? Like, do you have any safeguards or ethical guidelines to make sure that the message isn't lost in the marketing?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Mhm.
To separate ourselves, I love the quote from Henry David Thoreau. He's the author of Civil Disobedience back in the early 1800s. Also, Walden was another one of his writings. He was a philosopher,
Mhm.
early American philosopher, and he writes, "For every thousand hacking at the leaves of evil, there is one who strikes the root." And, you're talking about, there's in wellness industry, there's all of these things that some of them may be gimmicky, some of them may work well, but
Mhm.
oftentimes even the ones that work well are Band-Aid solutions where they're not going to the root. They're addressing merely the symptoms of that particular ailment, but there's much more going on behind the scenes. And there's many more symptoms that are also manifesting that are directly related to the root issue,
Mhm.
whereas we're just addressing a few of the symptoms. So with what we're doing with True Hope is we're going right back to the root by supplying the fundamental nutrients that your body absolutely needs on a daily basis, regardless of what's going on with the body. It just needs those nutrients to make all processes thrive. And so we're supplying the majority of the main nutrients that the body is deficient in, and then allowing the body to do its job, and that's healing and thriving and making all the processes go back to work again. And so when we're marketing the product, we're ensuring that we're very boldly making those declarations that that's
Mhm.
where we're going with this, that it may look like a multivitamin mineral supplement, and it does. And so oftentimes that gets lost in the noise of multivitamins. But we're saying, no, this is a multivitamin that does what a multivitamin should be doing. You shouldn't feel good about taking a multivitamin. You should feel good from taking the multivitamin, because oftentimes people take multivitamins because they know, well, I need vitamins and minerals, but they won't feel a difference from it. And you should feel a significant difference if it's doing its job in the body, because it should be filling in the deficiencies that are causing dysfunction in the body. And so It has been a bit of a hard marketing job because of the fact that it does so much, and because
Mm.
of the fact that there's so many other products that look like it but are not delivering the same results. And at the end of the day, the reason why it can be set apart is the extensive process that we put it through in micronizing the minerals and chelating those minerals to ensure that those minerals are able to go where they need to go, and ensuring that the minerals are in their proper balance so that we're not offsetting these crucial mineral balances in the body.
Mm. I think, you know, what you are saying is, instead of having that, placebo effect, that I'll be good if I take this, I think it is more towards educating and making the person who is going to incorporate this, you know, consume this, aware that, um, you know, this is not just going to make me feel good, it's going to work. And I think, and the symptoms, no, the symptoms will be reduced, or maybe the output will improve. And, the person will be aware to check those signals or symptoms, or whatever the body
Mhm.
is exhibiting, or whatever they are feeling, actually feeling. Not something is making them feel that, but they are feeling it.
Exactly. That it's a more inner, it's a deep rooted, it's not logical in that sense that regardless of what they want to see, the fact of the matter is that their body is manifesting that healing, and it's becoming more vibrant, and their countenance is even changing, where people from the outside looking in at them, they're saying, "Hey, what's going on? Like you're just more vibrant and healthy and energetic. Like you have more, for lack of better terms, life force within you. What is
Mhm.
this, right?"
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful thing to see.
It is. It is. And it is also very humbling and very inspiring, for us to know that, something which began as a desperate prayer, I think it turned into a decades long journey. And now it also continues to help thousands of people out there to just find that stability, hope, and peace. And I think that is priceless.
Mm,
It cannot be
hmm.
measured.
It is. It's a beautiful thing to see this type of transformation, not just in our own lives, because we were the first benefactors of it. Like my children don't have to live the life that I lived. They don't have to deal with the suffering and the trauma that I did. They don't have to suffer from the mood dysregulation or the thoughts of suicide or the depression or the anger or the rage. They don't have to suffer from that. My wife is healthy and fine. She comes out of a family with a history of mental illness as well. And
Mhm.
yet here we don't have to live that anymore. And that's a beautiful thing. So we're first and foremost the benefactors, but then to see it when we share it and we see how others are responding in the same way, and how they're getting these lives back, and their thought process, their day-to-day life is just so much better. Their thought processes are so much better. They feel better. They connect with people around them better. It is such a beautiful blessing to see that when you can have that kind of impact on humanity. And so when I look at this, many people look at it and say, what do you do for business? But really, I look at it as I share. I share the same blessing that I've received, that my family has received. I'm just sharing, and everything else takes care of itself. But that's where we're at. It's a beautiful thing to be involved in that way, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter about money. It doesn't matter, right? Like it's just you're making a difference in humanity, and you're being taken care of for it. So yes, I put food on my table and all that. It pays the bills. That's a great thing. But the best part about it is going to bed at night knowing I made a difference in the world.
Exactly. It's very well put, David. So, if our listeners they would like to explore more about True Hope, and they would also like to connect with you, what would be the easiest way?
Yeah, so it all depends on where they are. So if they're within Canada, truehopecanada.com is the best place to go, because the products are now available across the country in various health food stores and naturopathic doctors and holistic practitioners. So truehopecanada.com will assist you in finding it there locally. If you're anywhere else in the US or worldwide, even to India,
Mm.
truehope chelation.com is the international website, and they ship internationally. I know at one point it was over 105 countries they were shipping to, and that was largely because there was a documentary that was produced on us by the Discovery Health Channel, and it was translated into a number of different languages, and it was aired in over 50 countries. And so it was a real big deal. That was back in 2002 when that documentary came out. And so that turned us into an international supplement company overnight, just based on the fact that the Discovery Health Channel had produced that very well done documentary on us.
That's really exciting. That's really exciting. So, listeners, what I'll do is I'll have all the details and the links in the show notes for all of you. So just go and check out Truehope Canada. Go check out the documentary as well, and do connect with David. And David, I must really, really thank you. Because you have really, really shown us that even out of tragedy, something deeply, deeply healing can grow. So thank you.
Thank you.
And to all our listeners, I think the takeaway is not about choosing one path over another, but I think it is staying open to the possibility, accepting that there is a possibility that healing is always, always closer and more complex than we think. So, thank you for tuning into this episode. Please subscribe to The Mindful Journey, leave us a review, and keep listening to The Mindful Journey. This is your host, Sana, signing off. Thank you.